So how do you find the theme? Oh, friends, the theme should naturally emerge as you examine the exegesis of the passage. You have to ask, of all the truths that I've seen and extracted from this passage, which one is central? Which one is foundational? Which one is the most potent point? You have to distinguish between the main point and other peripheral points, because there's a lot you can get from one passage, right? There's a lot of things you can get. So distinguish between peripheral points and the main central point. Now, why is it important to discover this first? Let me explain. Because a sermon is like a music symphony. Let me illustrate it like this. You've been to a symphony before? You have a symphony here, right, in Weimar. A sermon is like a music symphony. Now, a symphony is usually set around one main tune, right? A main tune. In the same way, a sermon ought to have a main tune or a main point or a main theme. And when a symphony begins, usually when it begins, that theme, that tune is played slowly and simply on one singular instrument. In the same way, when you begin a sermon, you have to share that main point, that main theme in one simple sentence, and that will give your hearers an indication of where you're going. And then as the symphony continues from at first being played, the tune being played simply on one instrument, then other instruments gradually surround that same tune and that same music. Other instruments are brought in that gives more character to the theme, to the tune. In the same way, in the sermon, after you've stated your objective, your main point, now you bring other points, other instruments or points, but the purpose of those other points is to support your main point. Then as the symphony continues, there are variations of that same tune that's played differently to give more color and character to the symphony. That main tune is played soft, then it's played loud. It's played slow, then it's played fast. It's played in the major chord, and it's also played in the minor chord. And each variation of that tune reaches a different set of people. And that's the same thing with a sermon. You take that main point, and then you share it in different ways, showing how it applies in different situations, thus reaching different people that you're speaking to. Not every person is going to respond to the same tune that is played or the same application that is made. Does that make sense? Now, in the close of a symphony, usually there's a spine-tingling crescendo of the original theme, thus fixing the memory of the music into the hearts of the hearers forever. And that's what the close of the sermon ought to do. You're summarizing. It's the climax of the sermon. And in that climax, you're summarizing the main theme that you had introduced simply in the beginning. And then you're closing it, calling for an appeal so that the people would never forget the main point or theme that you had made in the message. A sermon ought to be like a symphony. Now, it is essential to find the theme of the message first before you write the rest of the sermon. Why? Because if you don't know the theme, you're not going to know where you're going. You're going to be distracted by other points, and as a result, you'll end up writing a sermon that's way too long with too many points. And too many points, people won't be able to remember it. Now, if you discover that there is more than one theme in the passage or text you're studying, if there's more than one main point, then you have discovered a series of sermons, not one.